Interest rates have been cut, but is it time to pop the champagne? Welcome back, everyone. My name is Mal Chia, and I'm back for This Week in E-Commerce, episode 88. Here to bring you all the latest news affecting retail today across the economy, tech, and more. It is Wednesday, the 21st of May, recording 24 hours late because, well, I'm still a bit jet lagged from coming back from Singapore. It was a very hectic week over there amongst the many meetings and conferences which I attended, but also spending a bit of downtime with the family as well. It was a great way just to get over there and experience a different culture, but also understand a little bit more about how the Southeast Asian market operates. Now, for those who want to know more about that, if you listen to last week's episode, I do a bit of a deep dive into what the opportunities are in the Southeast Asian market, of which I think there is many. And I've been talking to quite a few brands this week about how they could potentially be looking to enter that market. So that's super exciting because next week is going to be a Retail Fest, which is one of the big retail conferences. I will be there. I'm super excited to be there alongside the likes of Justin from the Aggregate Co., Nathan Bush from Add to Cart, Kelly Jamison, Edible Blooms, Kim Zorn, Princess Polly, and so many more. It is going to be a fantastic few days on the Gold Coast. So I highly recommend that if you are at a loose end next week, head up to the Gold Coast for a great few days over there. If you already are planning on being there, there's going to be a number of events on, including drinks, which I'll be hosting on Thursday night, along with the Aggregate Co. So if you'd like to attend, shoot me an email or just follow me on LinkedIn and send me a message. We'd love to have you there. I'll be putting out an invite on there shortly. So hopefully we get a chance to connect there. That's going to be a really great event. All right, on to the show. Now, one of the benefits of recording a little bit later this week is that we do have the announcement of the interest rate cuts. So the RBA today have cut the cash rate by 25 basis points, bringing the interest rates down to 3.85%. This is now the second interest rate cut of the year, which for an average Aussie with a mortgage of $666,000, a number which as a metalhead I do quite like, that's roughly about $100 a month in savings or $1,200 a year. But at a broader macroeconomic level, that impact may not be so positive. For one, what we need to consider is that consumer sentiment is still very, very low and has been flatlining for the last couple of months. And we're going to be digging into this with the next story. That despite the last cut, retail spending has remained very soft. And even with this one, I don't expect it to increase either, particularly in discretionary and fashion categories, which we've been talking about a lot. So for e-commerce brands, this is not a sign that people are going to be spending all over again. It really just means that things are just going to be flatlining or decreasing at a slightly slower rate. The benefit, though, is that we're about to enter into end of financial year season, which means that you can run a sale and not do any long-term brand damage. So be really smart about what you're going to be executing over this time to recoup some of that lost revenue, which you've probably had over the last few months, which if that is you, you are not alone in this because so many retailers are struggling right now, whether it's here or in Singapore, where that was definitely the case over there with a number of brands I spoke to. But also the other thing to consider as well is that with the reduction in the interest rates, borrowing costs will actually ease up. So if you are looking to borrow money, that hopefully will actually spur on the capital market. So there might be a bit more money in there, which is going to be more easily accessible. Particularly, as I said last week, some of those revenue-based financing lenders, such as Shopify Capital and Wavefly, are tightening up their guidelines. This may mean that other sources of capital will open. However, what you really do need to consider is that if you do invest and you are looking to take on a loan, be really careful about what you're taking it on for, particularly if you are aiming for a big inventory play or some sort of major tech upgrade, like potentially a new website. These things could add value, but you really need to be careful that you are able to service that loan and you don't take on any more operational expense, which could affect your ability to operate a sound business. The other thing to consider as well is that with the reduction in interest rates, you will start to see that the first place where the money will go into is actually the housing sector, which, as you know, has been very, very hot in Australia. There's so much about there. I've talked about quite a bit about how our overheated property market means that we've got a housing crisis, which leads on to everything else. This is where most of that money will go. So when you see that decrease into interest rates, it'll actually mean that the housing market's going to heat up again as more people look to enter that market, which means first home buyers will be the ones who will likely be squeezed out as the prices increase. What the impact this then has on retail, though, is that we expect to see an increase in spending in what people typically tend to buy when you move a house, which are homewares, appliances, DIY, baby categories, things like that, rather than fashion or luxury. So if you are in one of those markets and you happen to be blessed to be selling white goods or furniture, expect to see a bit of a bump. This is a conversation which I had with a couple of furniture retailers in Singapore as well, where that is certainly the use case, where when people are looking to move or when there's a lot of movement in the property market, that's when people look to make those sort of purchases, those bigger purchases. So really expect that to be the case here. So for everyone else, hold tight. You're probably not going to see that bump now outside of end of financial year sales. So make sure you plan those really well in terms of what your objective is. And I can't stress enough how important that is to be really clear about what you are looking to get out of that sale. Is it about cash flow or is it about clearing excess inventory? Likely it's a bit of both. So make sure you plan your sale accordingly. Now, I may sound like a broken record, but I am 100% against site-wide discounts. I am all for tiering your discounts to ensure that you are steering the traffic and the demand to the products you really need to clear. But also not going for longer than you should as well, making sure that you open your sale with a really deep discount and you can get in and get out rather than keep it going for too long. Many retailers I know keep their end of financial year sales going on well into July because they're looking to eke out every extra cent. But all that does is make the hangover even worse than it is. And in retail, there is no such thing as Sol Tonic or Bay Juice. There is no cure for that hangover besides people forgetting that you just recently ran a 50% off site-wide sale and demand starts picking up again and they're not expecting you to do another sale anytime soon. So thinking about what this means more long-term is that are we likely to head to a third interest rate cut? Now, my money is on yes, because we are not in a good position and we are certainly not out of the woods when it comes to consumer spending, nor the property market or the capital lending market. So I would expect that next month we should see a third successful cut, which hopefully doesn't then signal that we are on our way to a recession and the RBA is looking to stoke as much demand as they can. I suspect that hopefully won't be the case. And it's merely the fact that we've had 13 successive interest rate rises. So we are now looking to engineer a bit of a softer landing rather than signaling a recession. But also it's an opportunity to make sure that you do lock in lower rates on any loans which you're looking to take out, particularly if you are going to be making any further investments into product, tech, or marketing or anything like that. So it's probably a good chance if you do have any of those revenue-based financing loans to actually consolidate that into a loan with a primary lender. But also to consider whether that link between consumer confidence and interest rates are still there. That will be the really interesting one, because for so long we've been saying that these interest rate cuts will signal a turnaround in the economy. I personally think we've got quite a ways to go, though we've probably got another 3 or 4 cuts left to go before people really start to feel confidence in the consumer sector and start spending again. But if this does change, maybe it will signal an uncoupling of consumer confidence and interest rates. So very interesting times which we do live in right now into what the RBA is going to do, but also how the consumer market is going to respond. And because of this and the lower consumer confidence, we are continuing to see more and more businesses and cult brands go under. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we spoke about Alchemy Group and SurfStitch, how the SurfStitch website was inaccessible. It turns out that Alchemy Group have actually since offloaded both SurfStitch and fashion brand Ginger and Smart, who are both reportedly loss-making, to a mystery buyer. Both of these brands have been undergoing their own fair share of trouble over the last several years. Ginger and Smart recently going through a restructuring as recently as 2022, but unable to pull themselves out of that. In the meantime, shutting a lot of stores as well. And SurfStitch, like we talked about, having been in decline for a number of years, especially with the rise of Shein, Temu, but also the Iconic as well, being more desirable and preferable places to shop. So Alchemy Group private equity group looking to remove those loss-making brands and now investing heavier into two brands, the Lego certified stores, of which one just opened in South Australia and looks pretty damn cool. So I'm going to head down there probably this weekend, and General Pants Co., which they acquired last year for $60 million. So this is just a reflection, again, of the crunch which the middle of the market is really feeling right now, where Australia's mid-market fashion, is really going under when the likes of Mosaic Brands and more who've had to close up shop over the last few weeks and months. As more of these stores which have populated department stores and malls and also influencers as well have really started to collapse under the cost pressure, which we're experiencing right now with our higher operating costs, shifting consumer fashion tastes, but also lower margins as a result of discounting, which has really created this whole perfect storm, which has meant that these brands who never were able to apply any sort of premium positioning or premium pricing have been unable to adapt and been weighed down by all of their baggage. And this pivot from Alchemy to go from a portfolio to now focusing on a couple of brands which are focused on high engagement, high cultural capital, but also the whole sense of retail theater is showing a shift as well into where the retail market is headed. That those traditional mainstream margin thin fashion brands really don't have a place anymore in this world, when a lot of that fashion can now be accessible at much cheaper prices, but also much more advanced fashion and much more cutting edge fashion in other stores, where instead the investment into Lego shows that something which is so rich in culture and collectability and fandoms, of which really has rebuilt the Lego brand, where they have these epic stores where you can go in and interact and are just display cabinets to the whole Lego universe. And it's also, not to mention, incredibly high margin, experiential and collectible, is almost the perfect model for retail. It's exactly what you want when it comes to retail. And then General Pants, which is still one of the most populated youth streetwear stores, which operates omni-channel as well, and very strongly omni-channel with some really, really hot brands and products, shows that they're doubling down on those things which are desirable in the world, not things which are a nice to have or which are easily substitutable, but things which people desire. So that's a really key insight to take out of all of this, that you need to be thinking about how can you make your product or category so desirable that people will only want yours. For all the Mechanos in the world, people only want Lego because of the cultural capital which Lego has. For all the stores in malls and department stores, kids only want to go into General Pants because it's an experience. So that's what you need to lean into. You need to move away and shed those fixed costs, weight which is holding you down, and reinvest into a more resilient and desirable format. Because at the same time as well, not even 1 week ago, Collette by Collette Heyman and the Daily Edited also announced they were closing. Collette by Collette Heyman did a flash sale across all their stores nationwide, up to 80% off, and the Daily Edited has followed suit not long after. Matter of fact, if it hasn't, it's probably going to be shutting very soon because they were recently acquired as well, showing that these brands, who are very much indistinguishable in the market, which were perhaps once fashionable, but weren't able to keep up with the times and what the changing consumer sentiment was, have been unable to survive this, particularly when you've got a business which, although it was reasonably high margin, wasn't able to drive that repeat volume, particularly with products which were never able to really differentiate in the market, such as a phone case, which are now a dime a dozen. So what does this mean for Australian retail in general? Well, I think there's the opportunity here for vertical integration for a lot of stores to be thinking, how could they be more integrated across the supply chain, but also across different channels as well, to create a more cohesive experience, but also the importance of IP and owning IP and a brand which people desire. If you look at most of the brands now, you can see just the number of collaborations which are being done at the moment. That is what's driving growth for a lot of brands, whether it be the likes of the Oudi or Louis Vuitton. These are the brands which are focusing on creating cultural capital by collaborating with other brands. to make them desirable in this day and age. Now, moving on to our final story, and it is a doozy. A few weeks ago, we talked about how ChatGPT was integrating better product discovery in the platform, where you could go onto ChatGPT, search for any product which you're looking for, such as, let's say, best hiking shoes, and it would come up with results for you. It wouldn't just tell you the results. It would give you links directly to the stores of the products it was recommending. And Shopify then announced that they were going to be integrating really tightly with ChatGPT to allow retailers to be able to sell directly on ChatGPT. And I've no doubt sponsored listings were coming. So the question I had, as many others did, was how would this affect Google's business? Because obviously Google was the 900-pound gorilla in this space. You went to Google to search for everything, but the rapid rise in which we're seeing people shift their search behavior from Google to AI has been increasing very, very quickly. Matter of fact, in a show of hands in Singapore last week at eTail, over 50% of the room had said that they had searched for a product using AI. And this also includes Gemini AI as well. So take that with a grain of salt. But Gemini AI, ChatGPT, Claude, or any number of one of those have been used to search for a product. Google have now announced that they are going to have launched AI mode, which is a new feature that combines virtual try-on technology with smarter personalized shopping assistant. Now, this is only available in the US now, as it often is, but it allows you to do some pretty cool things all in a single package, where you can upload a photo of yourself and see how clothes can fit on your body in 3D, but also through the AI shopping assistant, allow you to set alerts and rules for when things will get purchased. So this agentic approach to AI and shopping means that when a product is there which you like, you can set an alert or a rule to actually have the AI purchase it for you when a price gets to a certain level or after a certain amount of time. So this is some really cool stuff. And this is things which we've been talking about for a little while, where you no longer, for purchases which are repeatable, need to really worry too much about it. You can have an agent, an AI agent, just make that purchase automatically for you, which removes almost everyone from the equation, which means that all it is your credit card, the AI, and the merchant who are making that purchase. So this level of innovation for Google means that you've got this really clear path between, the ability to go onto Google's AI mode, be inspired by fashion, to then be able to try it on and then buy it, all in the single platform without needing to leave that whole Google environment, which is obviously what Google wants. And that's what they've been pushing for with their AI overviews and just encouraging more and more people to be searching on there, because they, until now, have had, let's face it, a monopoly share of the entire search discovery type market. And there's virtual try-on technology, which has become quite popular. And you're seeing a lot of apps which do provide virtual try-ons in the fashion space, especially, means that Google now are offering this for free, which means that that extra cost which you have to bear on your Shopify store to add a virtual try-on app, if you push people towards Google to try on your product instead, well, they can try it without you having to bear that overhead. So something else really curious to consider as well. But also looking at how the agentic checkout works as well means that abandoned carts won't really be a thing anymore, because people will just be able to set a rule, and when something gets to a certain price, it'll just buy it. There won't be an abandoned cart. You don't need to trigger a flow. It'll just purchase it. So this does then pose a threat towards Shopify merchants or any merchant running their own site, because suddenly that whole experience can happen on Google. And this is one of the objections around marketplaces, where on marketplaces, you lose that ability to control that brand. If people are now going to be making their entire shopping purchase from discovery through to valuation through the actual purchase directly on Google, you lose a lot of that ability to upsell, cross-sell, but also sell your brand as well. But more importantly, you lose that first-party data and that ability to really understand who your customer is. But the upside, though, is that it does simplify the whole experience. And if you have the ability to plug into this ecosystem to support what you're doing, you could actually accelerate discovery as well, and hopefully drive people to your website to complete the purchase, potentially. But it's still far too early to know because, first of all, we don't have this in Australia. And second of all, it only just released in the US one day ago. So you need to ask yourself the question, does this open up the possibility that Google can become the front door towards e-commerce in Australia? Something which Shopify has been trying to do with the Shop app to make that the place where you go to, but also what Amazon has been already done, let's face it, in the US and is trying to do here. Is this Google's ability to be able to enter and become a major player in the e-commerce game? What does this mean for D2C brands? Well, we still don't know. You can either double down on the fact that you want to focus on your brand, exclusivity, own content, and that your website, your home, is going to be where you're going to invest and where you're going to ultimately want your shoppers to come. Or do you focus on that integration and optimization for discovery on the Google platform and AI mode? My take on that right now is probably that it depends. It depends on your brand. If you are legitimately building a brand, a lifestyle, fashion, beauty, skincare type brand, you should absolutely be focusing on your destination because you own that story. Like that destination of your website is where people can discover your brand, your whole brand narrative, and understand and more about you and preference buying your brand. Whereas on Google, you lose all that ability, as far as I can tell. But also, we don't know what this means for returns yet either. Because we can see on marketplaces, the return rate on marketplaces is roughly 2 to 3 times higher than what happens on your own store. So what will this actually do? Whether that behavior continues and people who purchase on Google are more likely to return because Google will probably enforce some level of returns policy with any products which are being listed on AI mode, or will it default back to your D2C? It's hard to know. So with that, this week has seen a number of shifts from an interest rate cut, which is potentially going to affect some categories, but definitely not retail as a whole, to seeing how private equity firms are pivoting their investments into retail away from the legacy retail models of the last 10, 20 years towards focusing on brands which have that cultural capital and brands that people really care about, to seeing how Google is looking to make some noise in the AI game where they've been falling further and further behind. It's a super exciting time for retail, and I really hope that next week at Retail Fest, I get to discuss this face-to-face with a few of you. But in the meantime, keep innovating, keep growing, and keep selling. And we'll see you all back here next week for This Week in E-Commerce.